All right, everyone, welcome to today's Fireside Chat organized by Caregiver Alliance. So my name is Nikki, and I will be your moderator for this evening. So before we actually invite our panelists, we've got three wonderful panelists with us today. We'll be talking to them later. They'll be also coming in online to introduce themselves. But right before we get to the panelists, I just wanted to introduce Caregiver Alliance. I'm sure all of you, if not most of you, know Caregiver Alliance quite well. But for the benefit of those who are joining us for the very, very first time, today's Fireside Chat on cultivating resilience and understanding what resilience is all about is organized by Caregiver Alliance, which is a non-for-profit organization in Singapore. And it's quite a special one as it's dedicated towards meeting the needs of caregivers, of persons who, of loved ones who have been diagnosed with mental health conditions. And Caregiver Alliance has been supporting caregivers through education, through support networks, through crisis support, to even tailored services to help caregivers throughout their journey of caregiving. Now, CAL is an approved institution of public character, so I think that's a charity organization. CAL also has introduced something quite interesting. It's the Caregiver Book Club. So with the launch of 2 books featuring inspiring stories by 2 of our panelists today, Jenny and Margaret, both of whom are authors and are graduates of CAL's C2C program. I'll do a quick introduction into Jenny and Margaret and our third, last but not least, panelist, Hoe Fang. Jenny is the first local author, mother, and suicide loss survivor to self-publish her book. Margaret is no stranger to the organization, having launched her first book, One Husband, Two Men, with Caregiver Alliance Limited in 2022. Both books will be available for purchase. We will be sharing with you the link through a follow-up email as to where you guys can purchase the books, because I'm sure a lot of you want to purchase and know more about their stories after the panelist session today. And all the proceeds from the sales are generously donated to CAL. Like Margaret, Hoe Fang is also not a stranger to CAL. He has shared his lived experiences in an earlier panel discussion together with Margaret last year. Both authors are working with Hoe Fang for the sale of their books. So before we get started, just a couple of ground rules for all participants. We encourage participants to type their questions in the Zoom chat at any particular point in time. We do have support from some individuals here that will collect the questions and collate it towards the end of the session, where I'll be asking the questions online to our panelists. I do apologize, we will not maybe have the time to go through all the questions, but we'll try to get through as many as possible. The chat is monitored to ensure that all participants are respected and safe. We do seek your kind understanding in sharing the conversational space with others. So let's be considerate, let's be mindful of the needs of fellow participants as well. This session is recorded. So if anyone does not consent to being recorded, no worries. Feel free to exit and you could watch the recording that will be made available later. I think about a week later, there will be the video recording will be shared. The video recording link will be shared and you can watch it at a later date. There also will be references to suicide and loss during this session. I do urge everyone who is sensitive to these topics to be mindful. And if you're not comfortable or feel that it may trigger you, you may want to watch the recording instead. So if any one of these do not sit comfortably with you, you are free to exit the session at any point in time. Okay, so with that, we can officially commence the Fireside Chat. So today's Fireside Chat is all about resilience, right? But what is resilience to begin with? So resilience, the way we've looked at it and the way we've understood it, is the ability to adapt and recover from stress, adversities, and challenging situations. I'm sure to a certain point, all of our resilience was tested during COVID at some point. It is the capacity to bounce back from difficult experiences, setbacks, and maybe even failures, and have the ability to keep going on despite the obstacles and despite the difficulties. Caregivers, I'm sure a lot of you are caregivers, often face a variety of stresses such as long hours, financial strain, emotional exhaustion, and caregiver burnout, which can take a toll on all of our health and well-being. Resilience cultivating resilience, I would say, helps caregivers to cope with these stresses and bounce back from difficult situations. So we're very, very lucky that we have three wonderful panelists today that are going to be totally honest and transparent and sharing their journey of how they cultivated resilience during some difficult times in their lives. In the first part of the session, I'm going to invite the panelists one by one. They'll come online and each panelist will be sharing briefly about their caregiver resilience based on their lived experiences. In the next half of the session, we'll come together as a panel with all three panelists and we'll take in any questions that you may have. So feel free to include all your questions in the chat. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Jenny to introduce herself. Jenny, all yours.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Well, I'd like to thank Caregivers Alliance Limited for giving me this platform to connect with you tonight. This evening's topic is, how resilient are you? Well, in a span of 3 years between 2015 and 2018, I've gone through a divorce, depression, and the death of my only child by suicide. You can say I've dealt with the 3 Ds. Now, as a caregiver to my aging mother, I'm dealing with the 4th D, dementia. Resilience, what do I know about this word? Except to ask the question, am I living or merely existing? And have I gone from stigma to strength? Let me start off first by taking you back in time. January 2018, at the Institute of Mental Health. I was there for a follow-up visit to my psychiatrist, seeing him for my depression. 2 years before that, I had gone through a very difficult divorce, and I was slowly recovering and weaning off my prescription drugs. As I was coming out of my depression, my 19-year-old son was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Having suffered from it, I was still at a loss as to what to do, because I simply had no clue about mental health conditions. But as I was leaving IMH, I noticed a CAL booth at the main entrance. Curious, I checked it out and registered for their Caregivers to Caregivers program because I needed to learn more about how to manage and support my son in his depression. During my course attendance in those weeks, my son attempted suicide. But God preserved his life, and CAL supported me during this stressful and harrowing time as a caregiver to my suicidal son. Little did I know that CAL would also be instrumental in my healing journey as a suicide loss survivor 6 months later, when my only child, Josh, attempted suicide a second time. This time, it was fatal. Fast forward almost 5 years to present day, 2023. Here I am, still alive, not existing, but living. Did you know that one can exist, but not be living? This I found out the hard way when I went into depression. They say that strength isn't about how much you can handle before you break. It's about how much you can endure after you've been broken. But is that resilience? The dictionary defines it as the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. As a radio DJ back in the old days, I remember I used to play this song by Billy Ocean. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. In short, to me, the word resilience meant, how tough are you? Are you the rubber band that doesn't snap when stretched and bounces back easily to its original shape when the pressure is released? I don't think I've ever been a rubber band, not even close to it, as it had taken me several years to fully heal from my depression, my divorce, and my suicide loss. Those are big T traumas. As for the small t traumas, well, many of us experience them on a daily basis because trauma simply means wound, psychological wound. Over time, we may still see and feel the scars, but how do we know when we're over it? Psychologists, when evaluating whether and to what extent someone has achieved growth after a trauma, look for positive responses in 5 areas. Number 1, appreciation of life. Number 2, relationship with others. Number 3, new possibilities in life. Number 4, personal strength. Number 5, spiritual change. Though I can say with confidence that I would tick against every item on that list today, but because of time, I'll just share on the last one, spiritual change. This is where I want to read to you a friend's quote from my book. From the mess to the message, Jenny shares her very traumatic yet transformative journey from death and hopelessness to living hopeful and purposeful again, and of the God who heals the brokenhearted and gives hope when there was none, unquote. Many of us who are caregivers looking after perhaps a child, spouse, or parent along the way may have been broken in our hearts. I vouch for that as a caregiver, previously to my son, and now to my mother with dementia. We may have been hurt over and over again, become weary, worn out, and burnt out. We may have lost hope in our situation, like me, a caregiver to myself, who wrote a suicide note to her son in October 2016 because in my depression, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Today, I'm glad I never gave him that note. Above all, today, I'm glad I didn't act on it. Spiritually, indeed, I've changed. Having dealt with death itself, my notion of death has changed. My perspective of my life on this earth has changed. As I'd written at the end of my book, from a season of loss and pain, I have entered into a season of purpose and hope. In writing my first book, my purpose is to give hope to others and to inspire someone to find a purpose in life that may have been lost because of all the cares in the world. In the vicissitudes of life, particularly as a caregiver, it's easy to lose our focus and our purpose. It's challenging indeed, but remembering to stay focused on our purpose is crucial for our mental health as a caregiver. The purpose of life is a life of purpose. And I believe that when you have that purpose, somehow hope would follow. This hope is not the kind of hope that says, if it happens, it happens. If not, then so be it. The hope that I'm talking about is Bible hope, an expectation of something good to happen. And in the presence of hope, perhaps we may eventually be like the rubber band that bounces back on its spring again to wrap around our spirit, soul, and body, integrating us to become our authentic selves again. Let me just quickly share screen with you on the background to my book and play you a short video to end my session. Okay, if you can see my screen now. It all started one evening after I had given a talk to a church congregation on suicide, asking the real questions, when I received a call late that night. It was a man's voice that said, "I just attended your talk and I have a question. Would you like to write a book?" I run a printing company with my wife, and we both felt prompted to help you print the book for free. Can you imagine the goosebumps I had when I heard that? It simply blew my mind. You see, this book had been brewing in my heart for a while since early 2020, 2 years after I lost my son, also the year I launched Stigma to Strength Singapore. At that time, I knew nothing about writing a book, let alone publishing one. I only knew that I had to follow my heart and get it out there. However, due to COVID and the lockdowns, the idea got stalled. Last year, again, this book idea came up, but this time I decided to write on grieving and living, a mother's hope, a mother's journey in full color print. As suicide is such a taboo subject, I also decided to self-publish and offer to pay for the printing costs. This gave me an opportunity to work directly with the printing company. So when I was invited to tour the printing press and witness the final stages of the perfect bounding of my book, I've since come to appreciate every hard copy of books I now hold in my hand, including my very own. Suicide being such a hush subject, I just want to say that if you do buy this book, you may be holding in your hand the first book on suicide loss that's ever been written by a local author, self-publisher, who's also a mother and a suicide loss survivor. I was told by this printing company owner that in the 56 years of their existence, this is the first time they've ever printed a book on this highly stigmatized topic of suicide. Well, I hope this taboo in a book will help break the silence, reduce the stigma surrounding suicide, and save more lives. Although it's taken me a number of years to write on this multifaceted, multidisciplinary, and multidimensional subject, I've made it no more than 35 pages with big fonts, kept it short and simple, and easy to read in 30 minutes. This book is also another answered prayer for me. It's a gift from a caregiver to caregivers, with all net proceeds from the book sale going to Caregivers Alliance Limited. Help me help them support caregivers with loved ones with mental health challenges. If you intend to get hold of this book for yourself and for friends and loved ones, I'd like to say thank you for your support. Now for the video, which is also my first foray into video production and directing. It's from the heart to matter, from my pain to paper, from stigma to strength, from my resilience to a reinvestment in living again. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. That was really, really inspiring, especially how the book materialized and how it all came through. It's like, it's such an incredible journey. I can't believe it. But it also restores a lot of faith in me that things come together at the right time. Thank you for being so transparent, and really it was inspiring. I can't wait to ask you more questions later. For now, what we'll do is that we'll invite our second speaker, our second panelist for today, Margaret, to introduce herself. So Margaret, if you're ready, it's over to you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Welcome.
And thank you, Jenny, for your strength and for making meaning out of your struggle. That was really inspiring. Resilience is a choice that each one of us has to make. It is the first step. The objective in life is not just to survive, but to flourish. When one experiences toxic stress, which is intense, prolonged, with limited to no resource, we need resilience to help us function effectively. When my husband was diagnosed with schizophrenia, my boys were 12 and 8 years old. I was a successful senior executive with a multinational who traveled extensively and working 14 to 15 hours a day. However, I experienced fear, self-doubt, shame, and uncertainty. My son was preparing for his PSLE when his dad was having his onset. At work, I was in the midst of merging two large business units, and I was tasked to deliver a 10% cost reduction with no relief on revenue forecast. I have no idea what schizophrenia is all about. I was juggling so many stuff, and I was emotionally overwhelmed. How was I supposed to preserve self and family when we were so dysfunctional? It was the worst crisis ever in my life. I'm now in my 16th year of caregiving. Without resilience, I won't be able to move forward with my life confidently. So how do I grow resilience all this year? I reaffirm my identity. I am beyond a caregiver. I have to remind myself again and again, especially after I stepped down from my job on early retirement. It was intentional not to attach work to my self-worth. It was hard. After working for 27 years, and retirement was never in my original plan at 50. I then reestablished the close relationships I trusted to build social support. I leaned on my siblings and close friends so that my boys would have some normalcy in their growing years. These close friends and siblings of mine are not judgmental in their love and care, which provided the stability we as a family needed very much then. I also leveraged my strength that I've gained so much in my in more than 20 years of my secular experience, such as planning ahead, prioritization, boundary management, creative communication, so that I could use all these skills for self-management and self-care. Basically, to go back to my toolbox. I learned to build self-trust, to be honest with myself, what I really think, feel, and need in life. I learned to manage my fears, shame, and uncertainty. I did what I believed was right and live my core values. I shifted my perspective by not comparing myself negatively to others. I found my internal validation. I make choices that are aligned to my values and not how I would appear to others. It is not always a perfect balance of all areas, so I prioritize what matters to me most. Nobody can make you feel bad about yourself if you feel good about yourself. For those of you who has followed me on the first book, One Husband, Two Men, it was about the first 7 years of my caregiving journey. It was a journey where I had to go through a mindset transformation to figure out how to preserve self and family, to bring about normalcy to my family that was so dysfunctional because we were having difficulty coping with my husband's illness. Now, the second book that was launched in October 22nd last year, it's about the following 7 years of my caregiving journey. In this book, I speak to the declining state of my husband's illness. I had breakthrough in my first book. I experienced some honeymoon years in caregiving where I saw good recovery in my husband. But the second book, I lost hope. I have to figure out how to move forward in life in dealing with the news that my husband will no longer recover as he used to show improvement. But in this, what I would see ongoing in future is his continued debilitating state. Now, the doctor advised me that I should place him in an institution. And that was a hard decision that I had to take. No family would want to send the loved one away. So to me, this book here, I talk about how I dealt with the tough decision, how I had so much guilt. Even after making the decision, I learned to manage forward and how to carve out a life for myself to move forward. So the second book talks about also how I maintain this love for my husband, caring for him remotely, placing him in the care of institution, but yet remain committed throughout as a caregiver. So I hope that there are something that I learned that I could share with all of you. And if we look at, and if we treat all negative experiences as life lessons, this book, I would say, it's a book that I bear a lot of my internal self-doubt, questioning myself, my agenda, my motivation for taking the decision that I did in outsourcing the care of my husband to IMH. So I hope that you would be able to gain something out of reading this book, right? So again, I'd like to remind all of you that nobody can make you feel bad about yourself if you feel good about yourself. Back to you, Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, for that sharing. It was really touching to hear the journey that you've gone through with your husband. I definitely want to pick up a copy of the book, both your books. So for anyone else who is as keen as me to read both the books, we have the links to purchase the book, I think, on the chat group. So feel free to buy those books anytime. And do remember that all the proceeds go to Caregiver Alliance as donation. So without further ado, I will invite our last but not least panelist, Hoe Fang, to share his caregiving journey with us today. Over to you, Hoe Fang.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah. Okay. Wow. After hearing both Jenny and Margaret speak, I felt that I'm a bit underqualified to to be on this panel because I mean their experience, their life experience, they have really gone through a lot. Yeah. But I've been luckier, you know. Maybe just give a very short introduction. My name is Hoe Fang, and I am actually currently I'm a retiree. I retired about 4 years ago. But all this time I have been sort of you could say a caregiver to my wife, who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when she was 18 years old. And that was even before we got married. Yeah. But of course, having said that, you know, I would also want to say that she is also a caregiver to me. You know? In the sense that yeah, though she has this condition, but by her response to the condition, she has actually encouraged me, given me a lot of inspiration that spouses or people that you know who are suffering from bipolar disorder is not a death sentence, that there is a way out, you know, because of her response, because of her cooperation. And I mean, in that sense, I've been luckier than most people, you know. Yeah. Okay. So what is this bipolar disorder? I mean, some of us may not know what it's all about. Yeah. What it means is that it's what we call mood swings. You know, an individual may sometimes come across a situation, a trigger event that really pushes him or her into a high. And this high is not the usual high. I mean, sometimes when let's say we win a game, or we come in tops in a competition, there's that euphoria, that feeling of euphoria, and you are on a high, right? Yeah, but this feeling of highness is something that goes even beyond that. It could go into a what where you become not you don't you fantasize. You know, you think that you are, oh, you know, I've achieved this, and I'm now I can be the Prime Minister of Singapore or something like that. You know, I can be yeah. So you go on to this high swing where everything is lovely, hunky dunky, and you can do anything in the world, and you actually try and do that, right? And this carries on for a period of time, maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months. And then suddenly you swing into a period of low. And this low is you become a couch potato. You lie in bed, you do not know what you refuse to do anything, you are just into depression, right? And so you have this swing that goes up, a high and then a low, a high and then a low again. And this is where it becomes difficult to care for a person, because you do not know what or when she would suddenly jump up and say that, okay, tomorrow I'm going to sing on top of the Victoria Theatre. I'm going on stage and I'm going to sing to, no, that doesn't need to be anybody. It could be, I could just sing in public. I could go to Orchard Road and sing along the road because I'm happy, because I have this high thing. And then next moment, 2 months later, she's down in the dumps, you know, doesn't even know what to eat. She can walk around the hawker center for the whole day trying to buy food and come back empty-handed. So it is these mood swings that are difficult to deal with, because they tend to when they are inappropriate at different times, they tend to embarrass you in a social situation, for example, and so on, So for my wife, her name is Wai Han. For Wai Han and myself, when we got married at the age of, she was 26, I was 28 then, I had this inkling because we were classmates in the university. So I had this inkling that she had a bipolar disorder, but she never exhibited it because even though she had sort of like got out of it already by the time I knew her, right? When she came to, when she was in university, apparently she had been so-called short, so she came in and she was out of that, but she was just normal, And I knew her as a high-performing student, somebody who's always top among the top in the class, whereas I was at the other extreme, at the other end, right? And so there was an understanding of who she was, somebody who's high-performing, very powerful, very articulate, take great care of herself in terms of life expectations and so on. After we got married, and then the birth of my first son came along, that was she was then 29, almost 30 years old. Sorry, 28 when our son came along, and that was a life event that actually triggered it. Some of these things, this condition, I was told, is triggered by a lack of chemical in the brain, right? And so medication in some aspects helps, because medication is such as insulin. You're suffering from diabetes, right? So you take insulin. So insulin helps you to put that chemical into your body, and then you are okay, right? So same thing, you some shortage of chemicals in the brain, and so this medication helps to bring those chemicals up, and then once you get an even keel, you're back to normal again, right? And it's life events that trigger this thing. And so when our first kid came along, she had a bout of baby blues. And this was the thing that triggered her. And she then went into a very high mood swing. So much so that even she herself was not aware of it. And when I brought her to see the doctor, because it was quite obvious that she was not herself, the doctor was kind of shocked, and his diagnosis, he told me, your wife is very sick. It will take her at least 7 years to get out of this. And I was like flabbergasted. 7 years, to get out of this. Yeah, but she proved in 2 weeks, with the right medication, she was able to get out of it. Yeah, but having said this, I'm not saying that medication will solve everything, right? What I want to share with is that in my journey, what are some of the lessons that I learned that helped me to navigate this situation, right? And the first thing I would say, that the first takeaway I would have with everybody here, for everybody, would be to maintain and build a sense of humor on what's been happening, right? So because some of the things that happen during this period, especially during the highs, are very laughable. You look at it and then you say, you are crazy, you're thinking about all this kind of stuff. Yeah, but you have to maintain a sense of humor. And what I'm sharing is not a series of check boxes that if you sort of tick it off correctly, you will succeed. No, it's not that, because everybody's journey, every individual journey is very different, and we have to recognize that. What we need to do is to deal with it as and when it comes, and use the attributes, for example, how do we face this kind of situation? I will always remember the person behind the illness, that this is not what. Is there an audio problem? Sorry, yeah, okay, you can hear me, right, everybody? Yeah.
Yes, Ho Fang, we can hear you. Don't worry.
All right.
Continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, so you remember the person behind the illness, that this is the person you married, and that who she is now, how she's behaving, is not her, right? It is because of certain things that has happened to her, right? And so you have to also, and then of course, this then comes back to the thing about, hey, will she ever get well? Will somebody like this ever get well? Will we reach back to a baseline where she is who she was before? I would say, don't have that kind of expectations. Not because it won't happen; it can happen. But when you have that kind of expectation, then you tend to measure everything that, oh no, she has not reached the baseline yet. She has not come back to that situation yet. You have to change expectations to know that your wife is now different. Your spouse, this person that you are taking care of, is different. You have to learn a new love language with this person. We talk about love languages all the time, right? Whether some people's love language is gifts. They want to give. Some others give acts of service. Others need quality time. And then there are people who want words of affirmation. Then there are those who want touch, physical touch, Yeah. So each of us have a primary love language between ourselves and the spouse and the person we care for. We have to identify, is there, in the course of marriage, we of course look at this, we try to understand our loved one's love language, and we try to use that. There's no point if you say your own love language, you say, I just love to buy gifts and give it to my wife, and then that shows my love for her. But she doesn't appreciate it because her love language could be, I need acts of service. I need you to take out the rubbish. I need you to clear the sink when you are after eating and so on, right? And so we have to calibrate that, So when somebody has this, when you are dealing with somebody with this bipolar disorder, you have to begin to understand what is a new love language that happens, that he or she wants when she's going through this period. The language can be different. It could be a high, it could be gifts. She loves gifts. When you're low, she just needs quality time with her. And that was what I found happened. When she was high, oh my goodness, one of the things about when you are high is that you tend to spend a lot of money. You will buy and buy and buy, stuff. And then especially if you don't have that kind of money, and then there'll be this expenditure, the credit cards will go up, cash will, expenditure will all be there. And then you will find that, hey, that's not, you have to deal with it, right? How do you deal with the part of it? Yeah. Then when she's in depression, you want to bring her out quality time. And so we have spent a lot of time every morning, make it a point, half an hour, go out to the reservoir, walk, and spend time with her, and then so the language changes. Yeah. And so this is the part where you have to start to understand the language. Your expectations must change. Don't worry about what others think, because in public, she may behave in a way that really sort of embarrasses you, right? I was just sharing that last time around. We went out and we were supposed to buy some stuff and so on. And I wanted to have some cooling off period. Let's not buy this thing now. Let's come back the second day. And on the spot, she assaulted me physically, and started shouting and scolding me in front of the whole public and all that, right? And so, of course, as a man, you have ego, right? Your wife is beating you up, So you can't. There's that feeling of wanting to retaliate, right? But you have to control this part of it, because you know that this is not your wife. She will never dream of beating me up in her normal state of affairs, right? So something has happened there. I have probably triggered something, and so we have to then take a step back and try to mitigate that part of it, right? And then, of course, there's always a danger that even as we go through this journey, that we somehow must be able to differentiate between the real person, the real creativity, and whether she's high or not. Don't blame everything that she's high. You know what I mean? Because there's a respect. My wife is a very creative person. She would think she can write poetry, she can do all kinds of stuff, and far more creative than myself. And so sometimes you worry, because then she will go out and she'll write poems for everybody she sees in the streets. So is this a period of high, or is this just her creativity? We have to give some respect, I think. So even though the person is having this condition, there has to be this respect, I think, that we give, and do not always assume that she's behaving this way because she is high, or because she's sick, or because she forgot her medication, right? Yeah. Because once you do that and you say things like this, you continue to create the stigma, in people with this kind of disorder, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Hoe Fang. Yeah. Yes, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think there's so many different kinds of variations of symptoms that they go throughout life. And I love the fact that you said that learning their different love languages. So with my sibling, I try to do the same thing, but I also know how resilient you must be to learn and relearn and unlearn and relearn the different symptoms and the different love languages to speak to her in a way that resonates with her.
Right. Right.
And having to deal with all those emotions when your wife is I wouldn't say attacking you, but when she's forcing you to buy something for her, and in public, I can only imagine that that's not an easy situation for you to deal with. So thank you so much for sharing, Hoe Fang. Really appreciate you going through all these details, because it really talks to other caregivers who are here, and to all the participants who are here actually about what are the struggles that caregivers go through, and why resilience, coming back to today's fireside chat, how resilience plays such an important part for us to go through this journey, a very difficult journey that too. So I have a few questions, and I'm going to open it to our three panelists. Now, officially, we have begun the Q&A session. So anyone, I invite everyone and anyone who has any questions to ask to please put it on the chat, and we will try our best to answer as many questions as possible. Yeah. I'll start off with one question in the meantime. Maybe, okay. So I'll ask Jenny maybe. Jenny, do you think mindfulness and building and cultivating a mindfulness strategy and self-care practices can help caregivers to build resilience?
Yes, definitely. I agree totally with mindfulness, because when one, for example, if when one, especially when with grief, suicide, loss, bereavement, mindfulness is very important, because you have to understand what you are going through. You got to be aware of what's going on, and it's only when you are aware of what's going on, you're aware of your emotions, then you can, rationalize it in a way that, like, for example, for me, when I was going through the adjustment stage of my suicide loss, and that was the time when there was no way I could see my son physically anymore, but yet at the same time, I just felt that I wanted him, to be there as well. It was an adjustment period for me, which was one of the most difficult stages of suicide loss for me. So I sort of was mindful about the fact that he's gone, But at the same time, I told myself, okay, I just have to adjust. I just tell myself, okay, maybe just imagine that he's gone away, overseas on university education, that is coming back. So I was mindful about the fact that I missed him, but I just have to deal with it and use some sort of mindfulness in that sense to process it in that way, so that I could go through that period of adjustment, rather than just because for suicide loss you got to go through the absorption stage, the adjustment stage, and the acceptance stage. It is the grief journey that you have to go through, whether you like it or not. Yeah, so doing that, it differs with everyone in terms of the grieving part. So you just have to be aware of what's happening at that stage in your grieving journey. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. I think awareness that you brought up is so important, especially self-awareness, to understand how you're feeling. And it seems like what you also did was to shift your perception. Okay, maybe he's overseas, and how can I look at it in a way that will allow me to cope and adjust, as what you said. Thank you, Jenny, for sharing. Would any of I invite Hoe Fang, Margaret, to share your thoughts on the question as well. So the question, I'll just repeat, was, do you think mindfulness and self-care practices help caregivers to cultivate and build resilience? Because it needs to be nurtured, right? What do you think?
So well, for one thing is that when you're a caregiver, you experience negative emotions a lot, and that is overwhelming. And to counter that, one really need to build a reserve of positive emotions, because that is the way for you to counter the negative emotions and for you to heal internally. So for me, I practice a tool called HEAL. H stands for having a positive memory, and E stands for enrich that memory. So allow your body and mind to absorb the memory that you have in the past, that you have built up in the reservoir, and then you absorb it, you allow yourself to sink into it fully, immerse yourself into that experience and stay with it. And then the L, you link it to any negative wounded part of you, so that it helps you counter that negative emotion. So you need to continue to do that because your brain is wired to be negatively biased. Okay, biologically, that's how our brain is wired. So if on a metaphor standpoint, you would say that your brain is like Teflon when it comes to positive memory, but when it comes to negative memory, it sticks like a Velcro. So therefore, it takes a lot more effort, and it's intentional for you to continue to build a reserve of positive emotions to be able to counter that negative emotion. So in a way, that helps you in building resilience to deal with all the uncertainty, the fear, the ugliness side of having to deal with situations of being a caregiver. Right? Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret, for your sharing. I think it's definitely inspiring to see how you use mindfulness. And I love the fact that you said our brains are negatively wired, because that is so true. We really have to build a reservoir of positive memories. Hoe Fang, is there anything else you want to build on that? If not, I can ask you another question as well.
I mean, I agree totally with Margaret, that this positive, you must build positive memories.
Yeah. Okay, so we have another question for all the panelists, and any one of you can pick this up. When you are providing care to those who need it, how do you ensure that your tanks are sufficiently replenished to last the journey? So kind of connected to mindfulness, but perhaps is there anything else that you do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can continue the journey of caregiving? Anyone wants to take that?
Well, I feel that one is that if you do not leverage your strength, you will struggle and you will strive. So therefore, whenever you encounter a crisis situation or that, try to go back and look for your strength to deal with the situation, or leverage what in Christian faith we have what we call spiritual gifts that is being bestowed upon you. If you can identify what are those strengths, you could better deal with the situation, because when you are in crisis, the best part of yourself is being suppressed. So you need to intentionally identify the strength that you have and leverage those strengths to help you manage the crisis or challenges on hand.
Thank you, Margaret. What about you, Hoe Fang? How do you make sure that you're taking care of yourself, so you can be there for your wife?
Yeah, I mean, it's important that you take care of yourself first, actually, because, in the airplane, you always say, when you run out of oxygen, you take care of yourself first, make sure your mask is on before you try to help other people, right? And so this is exactly the same kind of situation when we are caregiving for our loved ones in whichever situation. And so the thing is to continue to do the things that give you the oxygen. You take the oxygen, but it doesn't mean you take a drink as well before you go and help the caretaker, right? The person who needs help. You take the oxygen. What's essential? It could be exercise. It could be something that brings your energies up. Continue to do that as much as you can.
Yeah. Thank you, Hoe Fang. What about you, Jenny? Anything else to add on to that?
I just want to say that after I lost my son, I have my mom to look after, and she was also going through the suicide loss journey as well. But at the same time, she has dementia as well. So it was very difficult for me because as she was grieving and all that, I just couldn't, I have to control myself not to cry. And not to grieve as well, because I tell myself I got to be strong for her. Although internally, it was just a lot of just controlling to appear strong for her. It was a very difficult time. And for me, I've always believed that when one has got mental ill health, that will affect one's physical health as well. And without physical health, it is very, very difficult to look after a loved one as a caregiver. So both physical as well as mental health goes hand in hand. Whether you like it or not, it affects, they affect each other. So I'm very, very careful about that when it comes to protecting my mental health as well as my physical health. So I seek support. Support is very important. I try not to reject support, to give that the idea that, okay, I can handle everything myself. No, friends are crucial. Family members are crucial as well in the support.
Yeah, I think the support is so important, and especially, Jenny, what you said about the mind and body. I think it's so important that we realize that they're actually super interconnected, and the way we take care of our minds, our bodies reap the benefits of it as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. I've got another question. How do you organize your busy and hectic schedule, juggling work, juggling loved ones, without feeling burnt out? And the acceptance of, support from other people before you hit the level where you're drained. So is there a tactic that you use to organize your days and to build structure around I wouldn't say mess, but maybe just the disorganized, sometimes, the disorganizations of our day when we have so many responsibilities on our shoulders? This question is for anyone. Margaret, if you like to, yeah.
Yeah, I think prioritization is clearly important. And the sequence of that prioritization, it's also very key, because you must be able to identify which is most important. And based on that, then you sequence, because there's a lot of interdependency. And that it's an art and science. It requires practice for you to get better at it over time in identifying the number one priority. Because once you get that right, the sequencing of it will follow suit, and it'll be easy for you to kind of manage and try to juggle everything on your plate. Now, this also have to come where you're really clear about what matters most to you at that point of time. Not just what is critical, what is urgent and important, but what matters most. And also you have to, in that prioritization process, you need to live out your core values as well. Be clear about that, because if not, you will be riddled with guilt or regrets. And then after that, you're going to have self-doubt and think that you are ineffective. All right. So the number one, identifying the number one priority is very key.
Understood. Well said, Margaret. Anything to add on, Hoe Fang?
I think what happens is sometimes it helps if the company that you are in or the role that you're playing, your bosses understand the situation. You have to be upfront and explain it to them, and you have to take a back seat sometimes, depending on how you prioritize things. Yeah. So I was lucky because I took a back seat, and I told my bosses that I had to spend time looking after my wife, and they understood, and so they moved responsibilities for me. Yeah. And I was quite prepared to sort of give up some of those responsibilities, because the whole idea of working is to make money and be happy, right? Yeah. So and how can you be happy when your wife is not happy, when family is not?
Very, very true. Jenny, anything to add before we move to the next question?
No, we just move on to the
Okay.
next question.
So we actually have a question directed at you, Jenny, for you. So Jenny, what helped and what continues to help you manage grief and loss?
For me, it was after I got the second closure to my to the loss of my son, and that kind of like opened up a revelation to me that as I share, because I actually was sharing with about 80 caregivers about my suicide loss about a year and a half after I lost my son, and somehow or other the next day I just got this sort of second closure that as I'm sharing, I realized that, hey, I actually still have my son. In a sense, I could be his mouthpiece. And that kind of like gave me a renewed purpose in life as a mother, because when you lose such a precious, beloved child, especially for me, because my son was an only child. So it impacted me, a great deal, because, you don't have someone to call you mom anymore. The difference is stark, really. So I was, I had to kind of like find a new purpose in life, and that purpose was getting into public education, so that other parents don't have to go through what I went through. And I did a lot of research to find answers to a lot of questions that I had. So that helped me a lot in finding that purpose. That's why I talk a lot about purpose in my book, and hope as well. To keep me going.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for that candid sharing. We have a question directed at Margaret. So, Margaret, how did you transfer your resilience to your sons through the journey that you went through over the years?
So the key thing in building resilience with my kids is, one is really getting them to embrace the situation, the reality of their dad's illness. It's something that they will not be able to change, and there's no cure for the illness. And it's going to be a long haul journey for us to cope as a family. And so they need to figure out how to overcome stigma. All right. And to me, I start by being a role model to them. I took my husband on all my high achievers event, global event, regional event. And that is to build confidence in my kid, that I am not ashamed of my husband being with me in public appearances, all right? I gave them confidence that I could deal with the situation in the event the dad would behave strangely, and how I will deal with that by making his illness known, because I feel that the colleagues whom I was working with them are matured enough to understand the situation. So I built that confidence by taking my husband out on all those trips with me to Hawaii, to Taipei, to Korea, everywhere. And he was sitting and dining with HP's very senior global executive and APAC executive, having conversation. And I learned to manage also, and not being anxious about what would happen, and be really at the moment, and tell myself that whatever happened, people would understand. So my son used to ask me, "Mom, are you not afraid that Dad would act out?" But after seeing that, he traveled with me, I come back and I informed that, nothing bad happened. They started to bring friends home. So I have to demonstrate that to remove that stigma, so that it builds confidence in them to overcome that stigma. So right now, I would say that my eldest son dared to be on stage talking about his dad.
Oh.
He started doing that when he was in NS, when someone asked him to share a personal life story, and he went up and shared about his dad. My youngest son would share with his friend, but he has not gone on stage to talk about his dad. But what we have done between the three of us is we had a Fire Chat on Cal platform to talk about destigmatization, and both my boys actually shared about their experience and talk about what went on in their lives and how they manage the stigma to overcome it. Yeah. So I think it starts with me, right? As I am the one holding the family unit together.
Yeah.
So I have to be the role model. I have to demonstrate that, and that helped my kid, to build resilience. Because if they have stigma because of shame, they will not be able to move forward.
Yeah. And I think I love your sharing. I think there's so much of leadership qualities that you have embraced and sort of just leveraged to set a good example for your sons. And I think your sons will carry the torch, carry the light forward. Thank you for sharing, Margaret. That was really inspiring. So we have other questions. So Jenny, Hoe Fang, maybe I'll ask the two of you this. Based on your personal experience, can resilience be learned or developed? And if so, how do we cultivate that development? Maybe we can start with Hoe Fang. Oh, Jenny, sorry, if you're on mute.
Ho Fang, you can go first.
Okay, Hoe Fang.
Yes, I believe that resilience can be cultivated and can be developed, but you have to really look within yourself first and be prepared to change your expectations, your thinking of what you need, yeah, and then with that, you and like I said, you adopt a different way of dealing with with the situation. For example, when we got married, Wai Han was always wanting to be she's a queen, but she wanted to be king as well. So we always had these problems of fighting with each other, right? Yeah, I'm the alpha, I'm the king, but you're the queen, But after this, I realized that this love language thing and this triggering thing uh, would, uh, uh, would would be difficult, if we continue that way. So okay, I will change. You can be the king. It's all right. I'll be king mentor. Yeah. So I think it can be developed. Yeah, but the change has to come from within yourself first.
Yeah, I agree, Hoe Fang. Thank you for sharing that. It has to come from within. Jenny, what about you?
Well, for me, a caregiver to my mom with dementia. Prior to that, I didn't know anything about dementia. I hear a lot about it, but at the time I didn't know that my mom had it. But learning more about it and understanding the condition can actually help a lot in, when it comes to interacting with my mom. And I think just, ensuring myself that I understand what she's going through, putting myself in her place, empathizing with her, knowing that she is struggling as well. Although there are many times when, a lot of words exchanged can actually hurt you a lot, and sometimes makes you want to just give up, because, you're just so hurt, right? But then when one understands the condition, then you just have to tell yourself, look, I'm dealing with the condition, not so much with the person. And then that helps a lot in keeping me resilient.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned the research and the information that you were from a previous question just now. I remember information can also be key in helping us see things clearly.
Yeah.
And I think that clarity also helps us to build a resilience. So thanks for sharing that, Jenny. We have another question come in. How do you, and this is for anyone on the panel, how do you deal with the constant anxiety that builds up as caregivers? I guess with things always changing, sometimes it's hard to relearn and unlearn things. So there is a state of anxiety that sometimes we feel. How do you deal with that? Maybe we can start with Margaret.
I would say practice gentle, honest listening in the moment. Because if you keep anticipating what will go wrong, you will always be tense and anxious. Be in the moment. And when you are in the moment, you can enjoy your loved one, because you will notice things that when you are anxious, you would not notice, right? Because you always anticipate the worst. Especially when I was having to care for my husband at home, when I'm tense and anxious, I tend to focus on the symptoms. I did not focus on the small wins and the small progress that he made in recovery. The tendency for us as caregiver is to look for the big bang in recovery. That ain't gonna happen. So you have to look for baby steps of improvement. But if you are in that constant tension, heightened mode, you're not going to notice that. And that doesn't help you to be an effective and loving caregiver. you won't enjoy it when you are in that mode. So I would advocate you to practice gentle, honest listening to be in that mode. Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. Well said. Hoe Fang, what about you? How do you deal with the anxiety?
Yeah, I think sometimes anxiety comes in different forms, as in has she taken a medication, and because we think that medication will solve everything. Actually, really, it's not about just that. Of course, it's important that you, up to today, my wife is on medication, a maintenance dose. But the important thing is this: she herself will monitor herself. And then we will titrate according to what is required, right? And because she has come to recognize it, she has insight into her condition, and she's able to recognize and say, okay, I do need this to help me to get through a day. Yeah, but I'm not anxious about it because I know she's able to maintain that. Like Margaret says, live in the day, because you have that resilience. You are able to just take the issues as they come.
Yeah, well said. Jenny, anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, I agree totally, Hoe Fang. That living, on a day-to-day basis. Take one day at a time. I think that's just enough for us to handle in a day. And then for me, it's like try not to focus too much on the what ifs. What if I left my mom at home, and what if she fell, or what if, a lot of what ifs, and then here I have to go and stock up the fridge. Yeah, and then of course for me, support, it helps a lot when I'm anxious. For me, I believe in talk therapy in that sense. I mean, women tend to have talk therapy, so it helps to have someone whom you can talk to, who understands, and for you to vent in that sense, and somehow or other it just is very therapeutic.
Yeah, I agree. I think for women, we definitely thrive with a good support network, and just getting all of that anxiety out with a good friend, a friend that you can trust, a family member, or even a therapist, I think can do so much for alleviating anxiety. So I agree. Thank you, Jenny, for that sharing. We have an interesting question, I feel, about boundaries, and anyone can take this. So the question is, how does one set boundaries with a person with a mental health condition without triggering intense reactions? Maybe you could share some of your experiences on setting boundaries for your loved ones and for yourself as well. And this question can be taken by anyone.
I think the rule to setting boundaries starts with ensuring that your loved one is in a lucid state. Okay, you don't set boundary when he is in a state of psychosis, because nothing is going to get through. Only when he or she is in a lucid state, that's when you can set boundary. Okay, that's number one. And in setting boundary, communication is important. Use the I statement. Start with I. Don't always start with you, because when you start with you statement, you put the person on defense. Okay, so the condition of your loved one, it must be in a lucid state, and so that any communication can just go through and the person can receive it. Secondly, the way you communicate starts with the I statement, so that you don't put the other party on a defense. All right. And when you set boundary, you need to be realistic in setting the boundary. Don't set unrealistic boundary. Okay. And adjust the boundary, and extend it, expand it when you see your loved one is in better recovery state. You can stretch that. Right.
Thank you, Margaret. Well said. Yes, Hoe Fang.
Yeah, this setting of boundaries, as Margaret said, it can only happen when there's some rationality. Not in when the person is really totally out of the way. Setting boundaries makes no sense then, right? It's managing them when there is a certain amount of rationality still, and usually this kind of boundaries you can set you sort of sometimes you have to write it down. Okay, we need to do this because of this. Example, my wife, when she goes on the high in the past, she doesn't do that often now because now we don't have money anymore. Anyway, but what we need to do is that, hey, look, maybe what we do is that this is the amount that we should spend, because otherwise it will affect the family, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so, but she has to have a certain amount of rationality before that can happen.
Which is exactly what Margaret was saying, making sure that they're lucid, making sure that they're able to understand, and the rationalization of your explanation then, I guess, Hoe Fang, because it sounds like you're explaining to her, you're trying to explain the consequences. It all makes sense because she's in a state to receive that information. Thank you. Jenny, anything to add on to that?
Well, my circumstances are the direct opposite from Hoe Fang's. For me, communication is important, but I think the tone of voice is very important. But in my case, for my mom, I have to make things very short and simple because of the fact that if you go into details, if you try to explain things away, it's just too much for her. So I have to adjust my communication with her and make it just simple. Try my best to keep a gentle tone of voice. Yeah, so it's a lot of adjustment for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thanks for sharing, Jenny. So we do have, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So I'll start with one that we have here, and then maybe I'll come to a second one later. I realize that as caregivers, sometimes we are trauma bonded to our loved one. This is the question, yeah? I realize as caregivers, sometimes we are trauma bonded to our loved one. Trying to break that also ends relationships, especially for romantic partners. It's quite difficult when the power shifts in a relationship. Any thoughts on that?
I think if you learn to set realistic boundary, it establishes respect for one another. That is the first starting point. All right. Before the situation gets to the point where you see power shifts, because the tendency is for a caregiver, you would want to give in to your loved one because you know that your loved one is unwell. All right. But if you give in too much, all right, to the extent, this is what is going to happen. You call it the trauma bonded to our loved one, and you see this power shift happening. But if you start by setting the right internal and external boundary, you establish the respect. You also know at some point you need a time out to leave the person alone so that you have your own space to deal with it. We are all human, okay? So it is all right to give yourself space. It's also all right to have a time out for your loved one. But in order to better manage this before it gets to the point that you have highlighted here, and this is Darish, you start by setting internal and external boundaries, clear boundaries, baby steps, realistic boundaries.
Thank you, Margaret. Anything to add, Hoe Fang or Jenny, on this particular question? If not, it's fine. We can move on to the next question. I think, Margaret, thank you. You've answered the question quite well. So Hoe Fang, Jenny, if nothing to add, should I go jump to the next question?
Sure.
Yeah, because we're on a time crunch as well. So last question, because we are close to 8:30 and I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. The question is, my son has been diagnosed with ASD, so that's autistic spectrum disorder by IMH doctors a few years ago. He has been in and out of IMH up to the present moment. My wife was her main caregiver. Oh, I would say my wife was his main caregiver, but she passed on last year due to cancer. So in a way now, I am the caregiver. What do you think I should do now as his father and the primary caregiver? I am 76 years old. I had a stroke in 2017. As such, walking has become very difficult for me. And I'm diagnosed as a person with a disability. So this comes from Chan, and I think Chan would just love some advice to sort of help him navigate through the journey of how to deal with his son being diagnosed with ASD and him being a primary caregiver. Any words of wisdom?
Well, Chan, I empathize with your situation. As you're already 76, you need to plan for your son to be able to be independent, all right? You spoke about him being in and out of IMH for treatment. Have you ever considered each time when he's out of IMH, there need to be a point of transition where he goes to rehab so that he knows how to have an he knows how to live independently before he goes home. I would advise you to start looking to plan ahead in that manner, given your age and given your health condition as well. And this is to ensure that your son learns survival skills and learn how to live independently, should you be in a position not to provide the intensive care and ongoing caregiving that is needed for him. I don't know the detail, but I would advise for that because he should still be young, right? He should be around 40 or 40 plus. And if he has no other physical condition, he will be physically well, other than his ASD condition. And so he needs to be trained to be able to live independent should anything happen.
Thank you, Margaret, for sharing that. Jenny, would you like to add on?
Well, I feel that if it's possible to ask for help, ask for support from relatives, other family members, if there's any, or even for that matter, other social service agencies, whatever kind of support, I think would be very helpful. Yeah, and under these circumstances.
Agreed. Thanks, Jenny. Hoe Fang.
Yeah, I would imagine this is a fairly difficult case. And well, if the son has been to IMH, diagnosed as with autism and so on, there would definitely be a medical social worker available at IMH who will be looking in this case. So bring the matter up to the medical social worker. The medical social worker should be able to direct the son to an organization or to some resources that can help Mr. Chan. Yeah, they can help Mr. Chan. Yeah.
Thank you, Hoe Fang. That's, I think, really, really great advice. Very practical, very pragmatic, and I think it will help to build the scaffolding that Mr. Chan needs for his son. So with that, we have come to the end of the session today. I want to thank all the participants for your wonderful questions, and I apologize if we didn't get a chance to ask all the questions. But most importantly, would like to thank Hoe Fang, Jenny, and Margaret for their time, their effort, their energy, and obviously the authenticness of sharing their stories today with us. So thank you guys for everything. I've taken away some key points from Jenny, living a life with purpose to really help you build resilience. Margaret, building that positive reservoir of memories for our loved ones. And Hoe Fang, I think what I picked up from you was learning and unlearning the new symptoms, the new love languages to really empathize and connect with our loved ones. Not to forget Margaret's listening in the moment as well, which I think is so important. So with that, thank you, everybody. Just a last call out to the books. If anybody wants the books, the links have been shared on the chat. If not, don't worry, we will be sending an email I think shortly, within the next 1 week. It's going to be a feedback, an email that has a short evaluation feedback. Together with that, we'll put the link of the books. We would really appreciate if you could take out some time to fill up the feedback form, because we just want to know how we could improve our next Fire Chats that are coming up. And our next one is in June. So with that, follow us on social media. If everyone has not, following us, if everyone is not following us yet on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the social channels that you can think of, subscribe and you'll be up to date with the latest Fire Chats and any other events that Cal has ongoing as well. So meanwhile, let's continue to stay safe. And once again, thank you to our panelists and for everyone for joining us. All right. Thank you, guys.